Well, that was a fun debate. That was quite a contentious debate to watch. It was a lot more action, not action, a lot more fighting than we're used to seeing. I think a lot of the prior debates were a lot tamer than this one. And I think this one, they were really going after each other. I think the candidates know what the stakes are, and they knew what they needed to do to win. And most of them went for it. Some of them failed to rise to the occasion. And I'm gonna let you guys know what I thought, who rose to the occasion and who didn't. My overall takeaway, and this is one takeaway that I have from this debate, was that the differences within the Democratic Party, and especially the candidates on the stage tonight, are vast. It's even plausible to say that the differences like on the stage, are greater than the difference between the Democratic establishment and the Republican establishment. And this came up in many ways. Look, Donald Trump didn't have a presence on stage. You saw the candidates more going after each other. No one really went after Donald Trump in a week where his Justice Department is really going crazy and potentially having a lot of ramifications for what the position of Attorney General actually means in his relation to the president and the executive branch. Excuse me. And so, without him being on stage, we really got to see, not physically, but his name being mentioned or anything. Without that on stage, we got to see more of the differences between the candidates, and I think the major differences in the party. Look, there was this whole talk about socialism and capitalism. I think that within any society, a hybrid of both is really what works. We have socialist policies already within our government, but where do we want to extend that to? Where do we want to limit capitalism to? And vice versa. But I just don't think this whole right-left continuum really resonates with the voters anymore. And if these candidates are trying to talk to the voters in terms of right and left and meeting somewhere in the middle, they are sorely mistaken. We are living in a populist age right now. Let's remember that in 2008, 2009, we saw one of the greatest financial crises in this country's history, in the world's history, actually. And if we look at what happened in 1929 when the financial crash occurred then, and then the onset of the Great Depression, electorally, the country responded, the United States in particular responded by electing a populist, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who made workers the center of his policies. In Europe, we saw the rise of fascism as well. So the fact that we're seeing the rise of right-wing populism and left-wing populism is in alignment with history right now. What the United States did, unfortunately, after the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, was we elected a president, and it's not like we had any better choice. I don't think the electorate was there to see the faults of Barack Obama or John McCain or Mitt Romney in nominating at the times that we elected officials that maintained the status quo, and thus kind of, after all this great loss of wealth that we saw, we have an economy that's bouncing back and having record returns in the stock market, but none of that money is going to the American people. It's all going to CEOs. And so populism rises up, and that's how the population isn't concerned with, oh, are we going to be right hyper capitalist society, are we going to be left a hyper socialist society? I don't think they're thinking about that at all. I think they're thinking more about the policies, about how the parties are catering to the workers. Look, the only ones that are talking about socialism so much are the talking heads on MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN. Bernie Sanders, though he describes himself as a democratic socialist, is not up there being like, oh, we need to do socialism. Oh, socialism, 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 socialism. The Sanders campaign is not talking about it. It's the talking heads. They're stuck in this mindset of right versus left. And that just doesn't exist anymore. And so that's why I think we also see the great differences on the stage. You're seeing, the left wing as represented by Bernie Sanders, kind of Elizabeth Warren, and then you're seeing the right wing being represented by Mike Bloomberg on the stage. So, you have a variety of differences of opinion on the stage, different views on wealth and the influence of money in politics. And then I think the Democratic Party is also trying to find its voice in terms of like, okay, are we going to focus on this cultural signaling, or are we going to focus on labor signaling? Are we going to try to signal to our electorate that we're going to help them in the economy and in their jobs and wages and everything? Or are we going to do this woke cultural signaling that Elizabeth Warren is very good at, for example? And I think those are the tiny things the tiny and major things that the party is trying to figure out on stage. Rather than my winners or losers, I'm going to go through the candidates one by one in order of how I think they did, with the first one being who I think performed worst, and then working my way up. So my number 6 performance, the worst performance of tonight, was Mayor Bloomberg, Mike Bloomberg, who had his first time on stage. If you didn't believe in a phenomenon called ring rust, in which fighters go into a ring or a cage for the first time in a long time and then end up doing very poorly because they're just not used to the rhythm of the fight, then look at Mike Bloomberg on stage, because he looked very rusty. I don't know how he performed in, say, when he was in electoral politics in New York City running for mayor, when he was debating on stage or whatever. I don't know exactly. I didn't pay attention to that or anything, but he did not. He looked angry. He looked surprised by some of the attacks. He looked very dismissive, and he looked like he didn't care because he's got $50 billion that he's ready to throw. He's not going to invest $50 billion in his campaign, but he could go back home to $50 billion. And what does he have to care about what they're saying about him on stage there? So anyways, everyone attacked him. And with the light that was on him, we see just how much he kind of veers, not from the party norms, because I think he fits very well within the establishment norms, which is why you see MSNBC just going crazy for him. They run his ads. But I think he really veers from like all factions of the electorate of the Democratic Party. Look, even with the woke cultural signaling faction of the party, they're not going to take his shit. Elizabeth Warren, she exposed him tonight for the sexist that he is. And then with the populist faction of the party, that's more about economic justice and for workers' rights, the Bernie Sanders faction of the party, they're not going to take his shit because Bernie exposed him for the Republican that Mike Bloomberg is. So him being on stage just showed how vast, like the ultra wealthy and vast wealth, how that's a special interest in and of itself. He was able to buy a spot on this stage. The Democratic Party changed the rules the donor rules, and to allow him on the stage. Would they do that for me and you? Hell no. But they do that if you have $50 billion. And if you're buying ad space or ads, like commercial time on their network and ad space on their websites. So this just shows how big money is a big interest, and how Mike Bloomberg is a special interest in and of himself. Make no mistake about it. But he was attacked on everything from sexism. Warren did a fantastic job calling him out on sexism and bringing up the NDAs. Even Biden got in on the NDA stuff, which was hilarious. He was attacked on healthcare, on him not supporting the Affordable Care Act that Obama implemented. He was attacked very well on stop and frisk, on the Iraq War, his support of the Iraq War, and his support of George Bush in 2004. He was attacked for his policy on taxes, on redlining, and on wealth inequality. And the best attacks, like I said, came from Warren on sexism. But I think what's really going to take him down a notch, if anything does take him down a notch, because he could literally just buy more ads and he could act like none of this ever happened. It depends on how much the electorate is in tune with the debate. The one thing that Bernie said was, and this was in response to when they asked Bloomberg if he had the right to amass $50 or $60 billion in wealth. And he said, yeah, of course I have the right. I worked very hard for it. And Bernie had responded. He took the time to say, it wasn't you that made that money by yourself. I think that your workers had a little bit to do with that, which was fantastic. Look, that just shows the divide within the party. Are we going to be a party about workers, or are we going to venerate this ultra wealthy class and say that, this hyper capitalism, and say that this is what America is? The Democratic Party has to figure that out. What do we want to be, a party of the workers or the party of the ultra wealthy? And the other thing that Bernie said was, Mike Bloomberg owns more wealth than the bottom 125 million people in the United States of America. That's more than a third of the country that he owns more wealth than, which is crazy. And one thing, Bloomberg kind of shot himself in the foot after Klobuchar gave her closing statement of, Amy Klobuchar, go to amyklobuchar.com, or I don't know if that's her website. I've never been to it, but go there and donate. And Bloomberg was right after. He goes, or you could go to mikebloomberg.com, but I'm not asking for any donations. And the crowd actually booed. This just shows he is so out. He is just as out of touch as we all thought that he was. Probably he's more out of touch than I actually thought he was, but he's just as out of touch as all the candidates were claiming that he was. And this did not look good for him in terms of the debate performance. He didn't look presidential. He looked meek. He looked annoyed, like he didn't want to be there. And he looked like he could give two shits about it, because he thought, like, okay, I don't need to perform well. I got all this money. I could still just buy ads anyway. So who cares? I don't need you. He looked like he thought he was above it. And no, Mike Bloomberg, you're not above it. I had a few other choice words, but I'm going to refrain from using them. Number 5, who also I think did poorly tonight, was Amy Klobuchar. She didn't have a good night. And I think what she needed to do was, I think she got a little comfortable with her win in New Hampshire. She got, I don't want to say she got close behind Pete Buttigieg, but she was within winning distance of getting ahead of him. So she thought, like, okay, this was great. People are really latching on to my message. But she didn't go on the attack on anyone except for Bernie Sanders. What are you doing going after Bernie Sanders? He's got his own lane. Like it's not going to work. So she didn't go on the attack on Mayor Pete. In fact, Mayor Pete kind of owned her in the exchanges. I don't want to say I even agree with him on all of it, but he looked better than she did. Actually, I do agree with him on the criticisms that he had of her on DACA. Not DACA, on Dreamers. Well, yeah, Dreamers, DACA has to do with the Dreamers anyways, but they were talking specifically about the Dreamers. But yeah, there was a first attack from Mayor Pete. He was saying, "Oh yeah, it was ridiculous that you didn't know the name of the president of Mexico. Like, get out of here with that shit. Like, it's not as important that she remembers the name of the president of Mexico, I think, as it is important that she understands trade policy with Mexico, that she understands the border crisis with Mexico, and that she brings about good policies for those issues. Should she know his name? Yes, he's our southern neighbor. But honestly, I didn't remember his name. I did remember what his presidency represented in terms that he's a leftist president, and his approach to the drug crisis, the violence, the cartel crisis in Mexico is different than his predecessor and stuff. But the fact that I'll give her a pass for not remembering his name. But even still, she didn't just get attacked from Mayor Pete. She got attacked by Elizabeth Warren, and she got attacked by Elizabeth Warren on the vapidness of her policies. So, I mean, she wasn't expecting that. She looked like she wasn't ready for that. So, she even kind of like talked about her healthcare policy as being like a post-it plan. So now we have like post-it Amy. Sorry guys, my throat is really dry. I've been doing a lot of talking. But yeah, even when Pete was attacking her on Dreamers and her legislative record, she looked very flustered and annoyed. And look, we know how annoying Pete Buttigieg is. Like, you got to be ready for that. Like, you know that he's going to come at you with his fucking rehearsed bullshit, looking like fucking king of Harvard or some shit. So it's not like, no, none of us could stand it, but at least be ready for it. And she wasn't ready for it. Come on. She couldn't even defend her legislative record. Anyways, she was number 5. Number 4 to me was Joe Biden. He didn't do bad, but he didn't do good. And so not doing good is not good for him. He's got to do good. You know, his campaign is kind of falling to the wayside. He kind of just maintained the status quo. He wasn't a major player in the debate. He was ultimately forgettable. He did the same thing that he does in all the debates, which is tying his record to Barack Obama's presidency. And it's just funny that, like, after all this time, like, Obama hasn't, like, come out with, like, any kind of endorsement for him. So everyone's kind of wondering, like, does he want you to be president? But yeah, I think the other thing too, no one really attacked him in any kind of harsh way. Remember, Bernie for some time was mentioning the Iraq war vote and everything. And there was stuff having to do with Biden's past legislative record on busing. There's a few things that you could really go after Joe Biden for. Even I think the stuff having to do with like finance and everything, but no one went after him. And I think it's because they saw that he fell so fast. And I think that the rest of the candidates are seeing like, all right, let him just fall apart on his own. I'm like Elizabeth Warren, for example, she focused more on Bloomberg. She sees him more of a threat. She focused on Amy Klobuchar. She wants to get more of those votes back. And even on Pete Buttigieg, but not really going after Biden, because what is there to attack? The guy's I don't think anyone sees his campaign as viable. going forward. Number three, I'm going to give to PowerPoint Pete. That PowerPoint moment was not a good moment for Pete, but he did generally okay. Like he's extremely smug and he's very well prepared. But I wonder, does he even have like one moment of authentic spontaneity? There was the moment when Warren actually started bringing about the PowerPoint comment where Pete looked extremely surprised, which was just hilarious to see like an authentic like emotion on his face for even a few seconds. He had like he wasn't expecting the attack on his PowerPoint healthcare policy at all. Well, yeah, even though the PowerPoint Pete thing stuck, it's trending on Twitter. Even though that stuck, he got away generally unscathed. His the biggest criticisms towards him came from Bernie Sanders tying him to his billionaire donors, and it was just kind of the same attack, not attack, but the same kind of debate between Bernie and Pete about billionaire donors and a lot of other things on healthcare and Medicare for all policy and everything. But I don't think either of them really hurt each other with it. You know, Pete did well in the first two contests, but he doesn't seem to be trending well for the others. So I don't know. His attacks on Klobuchar came off a bit patronizing. He did get under her skin. But why go after Amy Klobuchar? It's not like, I mean, she was kind of hot on his heels, but I don't know. Like, it wasn't because I don't think she was taking votes away from him. He saw her as a threat, and I don't think she really is that much of a threat to him. What he needed to do was to improve his profile with Black and Latino voters in a really genuine way, and I don't think he did. I mean, he spoke Spanish a little bit, but that's bullshit because Latino voters are not looking for the early 2000s type of way of attracting Hispanic voters, which was to speak a few words in Spanish. They want actual policies that are going to improve their lives. They're a growing middle class in our country. They're working class, and they have actual concerns that have to do with their work, economics, with healthcare, and just saying you're going to talk to them in Spanish and do a little bit of cultural signaling for them. I don't think that actually matters. So he didn't do anything to increase his profiles, I think, with minority communities. Second best performance of the night was Elizabeth Warren. She came in shooting from the hip, as my friend said. She was launching rockets like she was launching Hezbollah type rockets. That's what my friend said, and I thought that was a really funny metaphor because she was just kind of like wild about it, and she came ready to fight. She debated like she wanted to actually win the debate and that she wanted to get the nomination. She came ready with the attacks on Pete Buttigieg's healthcare plan and Amy Klobuchar's healthcare plan. We now have PowerPoint Pete and Post-it Amy, thanks to Elizabeth Warren. And the one thing that she did that I think was fantastic this time around, Elizabeth Warren can come off as a bit wonky, like, talking about the details of certain policies and stuff. But she did it she threaded the needle really well with it because she used her wonkiness to dismantle the policies of others. So she was kind of like dissecting on stage what Pete's healthcare plan was, what Amy Klobuchar's healthcare plan meant, even a bit into Bernie Sanders, though she stayed away from attacking him too much. But I actually thought her critiques of Bernie Sanders' plan were valid, though I support Bernie's plan more. I thought that she had actual debatable critiques this time rather than the woke cultural signaling that we expect from her a lot. Oh, and then the attacks that she had on Bloomberg were fantastic. They were very well thought out. And I think they were quite effective in that they might have an impact. She had claimed that stop and frisk was actually intended rather than just, oh, the consequences of it were bad. She was like, no, the actual policy, that was a negative intention and you were targeting minorities and that's fucked up. And it is fucked up. I'm really mad about it still. And then she also attacked Bloomberg for his sexism. She did a fantastic job about that. She brought up the whole thing with the NDAs, and the candidates had a field day with that. So she was bringing the heat. She was throwing the hands. She was really coming out there to fight. If this was an MMA fight, I think she would have knocked out Bloomberg in the first round. That kind of attack, she really went for it. She like, I'm not sure if it matters so much anymore, but like just physically, she was taller than him, and so it really looked like she was talking down to Bloomberg. And they didn't just do the split screen. They actually showed them right next to each other because their podiums were right next to each other's, and she was taller than him and just kind of like she was attacking harshly on him, which was fantastic. Like I said, it was smart how she thread the needle with critiquing Sanders. She didn't really attack him. I think she realized what happened the last time she really went after Bernie Sanders with the claims that he was sexist or that bullshit, and how that backfired. So I think she realized, all right, if I'm going to go after Sanders, I can't just do these blanket attacks on him. I have to actually, come with real critique. And so that was good. Yeah, and again, she attacked Amy Klobuchar for thinking small, and yeah. Overall, I think that her performance may have an impact. We saw that the New Hampshire debate had an impact on the New Hampshire primary, and I think that it might have the same thing might happen with Nevada now. We might see a bump for her. And I think she did exactly what she needed to do. She needed to attack Bloomberg. Bloomberg was on the rise. Nationally, I think he was ahead of her. She needed to go after Pete. She needed to go after Klobuchar. And that's where I think she lost most of her votes. And she did lose a lot of votes to Bernie Sanders, but I don't think she's going to get those back. So I think she went for the votes that she knows she could get back. And then I think ideally what she'd want to do is do well enough so that she can then go head to head with Bernie Sanders, and that would be her best chance. So she did exactly what she needed to do in this debate, and if she's smart enough, she'll continue that same exact approach. And she's proven to be a fantastic politician. That's one thing I've learned about her on the debate stages. But the winner of tonight was Bernie Sanders. They came out attacking, but he was ready for everything. And he doesn't just let people attack him. He fights back, and he really showed that tonight. And they attack, he fights back, and he gets right back on message. So you attack him on his healthcare plan. You say, oh, we don't know how you're going to actually pay for it. He's like, actually, it's going to save the American people way more money. And healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. So he just does it like it's pure like strategy. They attack him, he fights back, gets right back on message. He's very focused. And not only that, he's framing the debate on everything, on healthcare, on wealth in America. He's framing the debate on money and politics. Everything is centering around Bernie Sanders. So if it's centering around the candidate, I've said this before, that candidate is winning. They came after him on his actual health, on pressuring him to release his health records in the wake of his heart attack and stents. I think what he did in response to that was actually pretty smart. He was like, Mr. Bloomberg, you also had some stents, if I'm not mistaken, and like pointing to Bloomberg, who had stents, I think he said it was like 20 years ago. And I think Sanders was just like, well, look, are we going to play this double standard or not? What do I think about the releasing of like more health records? Like, I think if he releases it, everyone else should. But also, like, if they're going to hold you to a double standard, I say just, I don't want to say give them what they want, because then they can go and, like, you give an inch, they take a mile. But just shut them up. Like, you know, don't let them have too much. Like, if your health is, if the records indicate like positive things, then I say release it. Again, I could get into this if the topic comes up even more. I don't see his health as his heart attacks or the stent operation as a bad thing. In fact, I would vote for a very unhealthy Bernie Sanders just to get 1 day of his presidency, so that his presidency can reform the way that government works in the United States. I would do it. I would still vote for him. Anyways, I'll get into that later, maybe in another video or something. But anyways, yeah, they went after his actual health. They went after his healthcare policy. It didn't stick because of the same talking points. And they need to stop debating him on healthcare. They all lost that debate. Elizabeth Warren is the only one that I think can, and the only way that she can debate him on healthcare is by debating him the same way that she did tonight, and talking about the approach about it. Because, look, we don't know what's actually going to happen legislatively once everything is presented. So if she talks about this approach and why she thinks hers is better, then that's a substantive argument. I'm not saying her argument is a valid one or a better argument. It's a substantive argument. But all the shit that Pete Buttigieg and Biden and Bloomberg even got in on it, and Klobuchar, they're all saying about Bernie's healthcare plan, it's all bullshit. And they already all lost that debate to Bernie. Everyone trusts him more on healthcare than anyone else. It's done. Stop attacking him. If you want any chance at taking the nomination, don't talk about healthcare. And they keep bringing it up. And they also attacked him on socialism. It was fantastic how he fought back on that by talking not about the socialism that they imagine in their minds, but the socialism that the government kind of enacts for the wealthy, and how the wealthy benefit from all these tax breaks, and how it's essentially socialism for the rich, and how Bernie Sanders doesn't want socialism for the rich. He wants to help the working class of this country. And then there was that cheap shot. I don't know if you guys noticed at the end in the closing statement, when Biden was making his closing statement, he said what he wanted to say for his closing statement. And then he pointed to Bernie Sanders and said, and Bernie Sanders voted against the immigration bill in 2007. If he had voted for it, we wouldn't have the immigration problem that we have today. That was such a cheap shot. But even in doing that, Sanders had fought back on it. He responded very succinctly. Actually, there were provisions in that would have been akin to slavery for a lot of the Latino population in this country. So, again, he did a great job. And then he went right back into his messaging, gave his closing statement, did a fantastic job. The other interesting thing was the Democratic convention question, where they asked everyone, would they support whoever got the most votes if no one had a plurality? And Bernie Sanders is the only one that supports whoever gets the most votes, because Bernie will likely get the most votes. But it just shows that they are all, from Warren to Bloomberg, they are all ready to do whatever it takes to not get Bernie Sanders nominated, which is kind of sad that they are that much against him and what he represents and how he represents the American people and the populist movement on the left in the United States. So that's my analysis for tonight, but let me give you my predictions for how the vote is going to be in Nevada. I say Bernie wins it, and I think Warren actually takes second. Right now, she's polling third, behind Biden, but it's close between the two of them. It seems that Bernie's quite ahead of both of them, which is why I think he's going to get the Nevada caucus pretty easily. But I think that Warren's going to do better than Biden. And then I think it's going to be Pete. But even that, I think Pete might even beat Biden because Biden really has been underperforming every contest. He's been underperforming his polls in the contests. And then I think Amy Klobuchar at number 5 and Steyer at number 6. Tulsi Gabbard is still in it. And I think she's focusing heavily on South Carolina right now. I don't think we're going to see any dropouts after this weekend in Nevada. I would be surprised if someone does, frankly. But I think we will see after that. I think in terms of the polling, I think Bernie Sanders, we're going to see a slow consolidation of the vote behind him, very similar to what happened with Donald Trump. Remember, 2016, they were talking about a brokered convention for Donald Trump. They didn't think that he would have the plurality, but he slowly started to gain it, and he won the nomination. I think we're going to see a dip in Bloomberg's numbers, but the X factor is the money that he's able to pump into his campaign, into all the ads. And so I don't know how that's going to play a factor into it, honestly. And I think we'll see a small uptick for Warren, and we'll start to see Amy Klobuchar decline. Yeah, so that's my take on tonight. I don't know what you guys thought. Feel free to comment in the section below. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and then also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. My handle is at Johnny Jabbour, JOHNNY, JABBOUR. And I'll be back with another one of these, I don't know, maybe Saturday after the vote happens or other major news happens. And of course, after all the debates and stuff. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you again on Johnny's Jabs.